Brothers, good evening. We all know what an elephant looks like, but let's pretend for just a moment that you don't, but that there's an organization, and this organization can tell you all about elephants, but you have to be a member. So you go to that organization, they accept you as a member, and this is what you learn about elephants, that much. Now we learn from the factual history of Freemasonry, organized Freemasonry, that its fabric can be likened to a patchwork in which occasional pieces are missing, others have not worn well, some have been sewn in where they do not exactly fit. Now, the patchwork is a result of the elements of Freemasonry having been stirred widely at separated times in our history and places by hands of men of different abilities, minds of different talents, an understanding of Masonry and its purpose. Now, these things made American Freemasonry unfold and become an accumulation rather than a creation. And much of it has been packaged, it's shaped, it's perfumed, and it's carried forward into today. Now, there are certainly external factors in play that influence the development of Freemasonry in America since the early 1700s when it arrived. But when we closely examine the factual history, we find five periods of rapid expansion of membership and lodges that also played a substantial internal role. Now, while these periods were influenced and stirred by external conditions, the fraternity's response to each of those periods show not only a lack of quality control of Masonry's historical design, intent, aim, and purpose, but of significant shortage of quality assurance. Now, quantity of membership in lodges has yet proven to be a feature on which the success of all of Masonry hinges, and many Masons and their leaders throughout our history have believed that. But each period that you see on the slide are these five periods of unbridled rapid expansion. They were every one followed by a rapid, a steep, and steady decline in membership, as well as leaving the fraternity with a change in the character of its membership. Now, affirmed by this cycle of expansion, then decline, is the lesson that the powerful idea of Masonry not only demands that its west gate be consistently and diligently guarded, but that all of those admitted must be suited for membership, properly instructed and educated about the historical intent, its design, its aim, and purpose of Masonry itself. Moreover, the manner in which Masonry is administered and conveyed must be capable of sustaining regardless of the number of names on a membership roster. Now, the notion that all that's necessary for a candidate to become a Mason is to usher him through ritual degrees merely forged our culture into the mistaken belief that becoming a Mason is only an event rather than the process that it's intended to be. By the end of the 20th century, a significant consequence of this last rapid expansion that occurred from 1944 to 1959 became increasingly troubling. American Masonry lost 67% of the members by 2000. It became peripheral in the eye of the public. By 2020, another 940,000 plus names disappeared from the reported membership rolls in the United States. Now, attempts to reverse that condition or at least stabilize the once high membership from that steady decline have not proven successful. And as a result, we have seen the no solicitation rule encroached. We've seen standards weakened. We've seen the casualization of our processes and protocols creep into Freemasonry as we reach the point where we are today. And that point is that 56% of our members are inactive in our lodges. Now, there are certainly valid reasons that influence the condition of Masonry in the past years and today, but what we can't ignore is that our own records, our experiences, they show that external causes are not solely responsible for the condition of American Freemasonry in 2024. Now, since the 1990s, we've slowly become more aware that ceremonial acts without adequate explanation, scarce exploration, and discussion of Masonry in lodges about our allegories, our lessons, our symbols, our factual history, our heritage, our processes have also proven responsible for these serious shortcomings. And that over generations, all of these things contributed and gradually changed the course, along with the character, and gradually the intent and design of the historical purpose of Masonry has also changed. Now, if our purpose is to take an already good man and make him better, how's that accomplished? By merely ushering an even good man through 3 rituals and then leaving him to his own devices to diligently study, understand, absorb, and integrate the lessons and philosophies of Masonry into his respective life. That idea that ritual alone makes better a good man has not proven to stimulate the mind of all we admit. We haven't stimulated all we admit to think, open their hearts to insight, raise their minds, their spirit, or to higher aspirations, intellectually, spiritually, or psychologically. Now, nevertheless, this all you need is ritual approach has been the approach most commonly used since at least the 1800s. Now, we know this because of this. We know it because our own records, Masonic literature, studies since the 20th century alone, as well as our current observations. And since the 1840s, many blunt warnings echo from these records and our literature that shows that the Freemasonry in America was producing, quote, too many semi-manufactured Masons in scores of semi-manufactured lodges, unquote. Now, while we swelled our membership ranks during these 5 periods, that undoubtedly suggested to many that Masonry was flourishing. But valid research shows us that these rapid expansions, coupled with the consistent drift from adequate instruction beyond ritual, carried with it this threat of decay of this organization. In 1928, after nearly 90 years of calls by many Sentinel Masons and their leaders and Masonic scholars to do something about this beleaguering predicament of making members by wholesale without providing them an intelligent and authentic knowledge of Masonry or what it means with no definite objects beyond fellowship and philanthropy, a practical and workable solution was finally proposed. Now, this stunningly simple proposal continues to be relevant today, if that is, as the author of that proposal said, the fraternity is wise enough to use it and really means business about Masonic education. Not sure what happened there, Ryan, but I'll leave it up to you. The author of that particular solution was Joseph Fort Newton Brothers. He is one of the true Masonic luminaries of the 20th century. He recognized, as did many of his contemporaries before him, the consequences throughout American Masonry that sprang from the widespread negligence guarding the West Gate and the lack of adequate Masonic education. Following his seminal book, The Builders, published in 1914, Newton became the first editor-in-chief of the Builder magazine in 1915, a publication of the National Masonic Research Society of Iowa, and he remained in that position until 1923. Many Masonic librarians, scholars, and students of Masonry believe that the Builder magazine was the best American Masonic magazine ever published. Now, Newton's clear and sensible 1928 solution came as a result of his work as years of editor of that magazine and as an ordained minister stationed in England during World War I, and the influence of Andrew S. McBride, the celebrated Scottish Mason and luminary that he met during World War I. Now, Newton was already aware that American Masonry had too long relied on the belief that elaboration on Masonic instruction and education was thought to be best served after a man had been raised to the degree of Master Mason. Like many of those before and after him, Newton was quite aware that instruction and education in Masonic lodges throughout America was irregular and scarce. Newton wrote that there could be no defensible claim that Masonry had been imparted in a manner pure and unimpaired from generation to generation. And again, as others before him repeatedly pointed out, and have pointed out since, the majority of Masons in America usually obtain only the most general idea of the meaning of Masonic ceremonies, and seldom do they penetrate further than the elementary moral interpretation of our principal symbols. He wrote that the Builder magazine had a hold of a big idea, but they had it by the wrong end. He realized that while the magazine was able to assemble some 20,000 subscribers, readers of and writers for the Builder, that in comparison with the number of Masons in America at the time, which was 3.2 million, there were very few that were educated and well instructed about Masonry. And as he said, those that were hardly a drop in the bucket. Newton concluded that the issues surrounding inadequate or absent instruction were not going to be resolved by magazines, nor by journals, or the mere hope that once a man was ushered through Masonry, made a Master Mason, that he was then left to his own devices to, in essence, just figure it out. He also recognized that research societies could never do the things that needed to be done, simply because too many members that were already insufficiently instructed in the fundamentals of Masonry. And making matters worse, many of those who were insufficiently instructed had already been elevated in their subordinate lodges and grand lodges as leaders. Now, he said with a hint of acerbity, quote, that surely a grand lodge ought to be as eager to have at least elementary knowledge of Masonry imparted to its young men, and that his plan, was neither impossible or impractical if grand lodges and their subordinate lodges, again, really meant business and were wise enough to use it. Newton asked this question: should a grand lodge or its subordinate lodges decide to teach Masonry to its young men, how, at that point, could such an undertaking be began? He proposed that jurisdictions prepared what he called a digest of facts, a uniform curricula, as it were, from which all instruction came for all candidates as they advanced through each degree, and that it be consistently enforced. He proposed that clear and accurate information about the origin and development of the craft be part of that curriculum, and that it be taught by qualified instructors and trained to teach the meaning of the ritual, the symbols, the laws and customs of our craft, again, as candidates are advanced through the degrees, so that they may have sufficient time to learn and absorb the meaning of each degree, instead of relying on the hope that later all these candidates would on their own strive to become Masons, not just bestow the title because they were ushered through our degrees. He proposed too, as set forth in organized Freemasonry's very first constitution in 1723, that lodge masters and other officers, elected and appointed are based on merit alone. Importantly, he consistently pointed out that the process of rushing candidates through the degrees with little to no instruction, if it worked as well as many people believe, there would have been no recurring calls to address the matter since the early 1800s. Now, moreover, Newton called attention to the fact that sufficient instruction of those who make up any organization, whether it's business, corporations, military, field of academics, medicine, agriculture, the law, education, was imperative to the success of those enterprises. There's been no valid research, brothers, or legitimate reason put forth yet to date that indicate Newton's simple proposal would not work for the institution of Freemasonry, if, that is, the institution of Freemasonry meant business about Masonic education. Although the common sense behind Newton's proposal was stunning, Newton found that convincing jurisdictions to adopt such a dramatic diversion from that to which the Masonic culture was accustomed was like bending granite. And the opposition to and lack of interest in the recommendation to replace the all you need is ritual approach proved, at least collectively around the nation, unsurmountable. Although some in the fraternity made advances using various parts of Newton's concept, progress in scale today, again, fits his 1928 description. It's hardly a drop in the bucket. Now, in essence, not much has changed since the mid-1800s in the way the fraternity conveys and instructs Masonry regarding the scale of what today we think is Masonic education. But Newton and those who supported this solution then and now are aware and were aware that creating well-informed corps of Masons around the country could not happen overnight, even if every lodge adopted every part of Newton's program. It takes time and commitment. But providing the necessary instruction and education as candidates advanced through the degrees was clearly, and it remains today, the place to start. And it was clearly then, and it is clearly today, if we are to effectively address the deficit of education and instruction in Masons, what needs to be done. Now, these lodges that have not earnestly put forth the effort and time and labor to explore this process, they're in no position to claim that doing so does not advance the primary business of all Masonic lodges. And that primary business, brothers, is, without question, the exploration of Freemasonry. Now, it's not an easy task to change what amounts to the deeply embedded culture that we find in American Masonry, where we find it much more convenient to continue to do what's been regularly done for multiple decades regarding education. Maybe once in a while, maybe just some memorization, and immediately, if you do that, you become a Mason. There's many lodges in America today that have done the opposite. They've done it to the extent that what they have accomplished has become institutionalized in their lodges. They've rejected this unsound assumption that the size of an organization is much more important than the quality and the capacity of its membership. Now, it wasn't until the 1990s, 30 years after steady and relentless membership decline since 1959, that the public's dwindling interest in Masonry was clear and apparent. With varied levels of success, the work of these lodges who adopted Newton's approach became more widely known by the end of the 1990s, of course. It became better known by the end of the first decade of the 21st century. And having become mainstream source of information for many Masons by the late 1990s, it's the internet that may be credited for much of this awareness, not other lodges and not grand lodges. The internet responsible for spreading these ideas. Now, as noted, Newton was not the first, and he's certainly not the last of the Sentinels and Sustainers of the historical intent, aim, and purpose of Masonry, but you can learn more about those individuals other than Newton by perhaps looking at two sources right here among the many that are out there. If you're interested, I would suggest that you look at what has been compiled by the Rubicon Masonic Society and William O'Ware Lodge of Research in their book review and summaries. That's now in its 4th edition, and it's available by PDF, and I'll be glad to send you a copy if you'll get your email address to Brother Ryan. I'm sure he'll forward it to me, and you'll receive this at no cost. And you'll see 83 books in all of our journals, summarized and reviewed in one place, and you can pick out what you may or may not want to read. I would also encourage you to visit the William O'Ware Lodge of Research that has an equal amount of Masonic education opportunities for any Mason who's interested in more than he has at this moment. The official records of Lexington Lodge No. 1 prior to 2010 reveals that the last time there was a consistent emphasis placed on Masonic education in that lodge was 1914. Our highest point of membership was 1,696 men. Hard to love names on a membership roster, brother. Hard to even figure out who they are. This finding led to a program that was piloted and patterned after Newton's 1928 proposal. That pilot program was adopted in 2012, and over the past 12 years, we've expanded it. And today, the program is the nucleus around which Lexington Lodge 1 has rebuilt not only its lodge, but its culture. Now, the design of the program is intended to assure that every candidate admitted into our ranks is provided the same quality Masonic instruction and receives that instruction as they advance through the degrees, not later. Today, every elected and appointed officer who was initiated, passed, and raised at No. 1 since 2012, and the most active involved members of our lodge have successfully advanced through what we refer to as a structured degree program. Now, the core curricula for each degree is found in these guidebooks. Each class member is provided a copy of the appropriate guidebook for their respective degree when classes begin, which is usually the week following their initiation or their passing and raising. Our guidebooks are now in the 7th edition. Now, the core curriculum of these books is broad in scope, and the content explores each ritual, lectures, excuse me, and the allegories, symbols, philosophies, tenets of each of the degrees and their relationship to each other. And they instill a foundation that better prepares a candidate to be advanced to the next degree. The guidebook also includes various papers, essays, documents that explore different perspectives about Masonry. And all of this is punctuated by hours of deeper discussion about values, ethics, moral principle, and it's all interlaced with discussions about the relevance of Masonry in the 21st century and how our philosophies can be integrated into our personal lives. In our classes, we also expound on our bylaws, the Kentucky Constitution, the processes, protocols, management, and the inner workings of our own lodge, of course, including the function, responsibilities, and expectations of the officers. Importantly, the curricula also includes a factual history of Masonry itself, and you can see how that's important to a 236-year-old lodge. Our members recognize that we are not the lodge we were just 12 years ago, but some believe, if we don't instruct it, that we've been doing this since 1788, and we haven't. Importantly, the curricula also includes much more than just a few classes about learning some degree work. It's more than just a thick booklet to hand to a candidate and say, read this at your leisure. One officer is appointed by the master each year that kicks off this program every single calendar year. What he's assigned to do, he's the point of contact for every potential candidate, every prospect. He coordinates the correspondence, he coordinates telephone calls, he meets with the prospective candidates. He determines first, the first person to make the determination if this person meets the qualifications to even submit a petition. And if so, that prospect, he's invited to join us at an upcoming fellowship dinner that we have before every stated meeting. He's introduced to other candidates and other class members. He's given a tour of the facility, and if he's interested, we provide him with a more extensive overview about what the process is to become a member at Lexington 1. Now, we don't accept petitions from any prospective candidate unless they visited us at least once, and they've attended what we call an orientation meeting that we hold once a month, at which we get down and into the details about what it means to be a Mason and what is required to be a Mason at Lexington Lodge No. 1. The petition, if it is submitted at all, our investigation commences immediately afterwards once it's approved. And among the many things that are standard in all of our investigations is that the committee strives to determine if the candidate actually has the time in his life to devote to Freemasonry. That means attending classes. And when we get down into discussions with the candidates, we learn that the candidate is coaching 6 different softball teams, and all of his children are under 9 years old. He holds 2 jobs. His wife has 2 jobs and have no family to help him in the area. We do have to ask them, do you have time for Masonry? Most of them don't after they learn that to be a Mason at number 1, you have to go through 24 weeks of a assigned curricula from our guidebooks for each degree. And you have to show up, and you have to participate, and you have to be there for those 24 weeks, which sometimes can last longer depending on illness and holidays and the advancement of the class itself. Each of the classes usually meet about 3 hours, and we have no more than 4 candidates in each class. All classes are coordinated by 8 members of our Instructor Corps, which is part of our education committee, and every instructor is trained to teach in the lecture and facilitation style created by our curricula, and to follow that design through an instructor manual, which is also in its 7th edition. 2 instructors are assigned to each degree class. One is a first chair. He's the one that has experience in teaching all 3 degrees, and a second chair who may be a new instructor who hasn't taught that particular degree yet. We have sometimes 2 or 3 of these degree classes going throughout our calendar year, and we're consistently adding members to our Instructor Corps. Now, during the 24 weeks, we also encourage these members to attend class and our fellowship dinners, participate in other Masonic gatherings that we sponsor, our festive board, attend our educational Zoom programs, and become more acquainted with the members of our lodge. Now, we do not promote, brothers, what we do as a prescription for every American Masonic lodge. But we do believe that the proposal that Newton put forth in 1928 is relevant and it's important today. And for the past 12 years of strict observance to the intent and application of our structured degree program validates the practicality and the workability of Newton's common sense approach to Masonic education. Now, what we do and how we do it is what our lodge has found to be the Masonic experience that the majority of our active involved members seek, and the best approach that we have found to inspire and sustain the interest of our candidates, as well as constructively advance the perpetuity of our 236-year-old lodge. Now, another important key to our program is that the instructors are trained. This program is hobbled if a person takes the degree book, hands it to a candidate and says, let's meet once a week and learn some ritual, and if you have any questions, just ask me. That's not instruction. That's not constructive Masonic education. A curricula is. And keeping up with the curricula, just like it's college, advanced graduate studies. You need to keep up with it, you need to learn it, and you need to know what you are saying you are taking your obligation to do. And most men are very surprised to find out what they've obligated themselves to if they ever study the obligation. Another important key is that we do not accept other people from other lodges into our program because we don't know if they're committed. Now, if we can find out that they are, we have accepted many brothers from other lodges to go all the way through our program, and we're glad to do that if they are committed and devoted to learning Freemasonry. The word sorry that you see on this slide, that's Latin, and it's the root of the word education. Sorry means to mold, means to train. The word edicere, on the other end, it's another root, and that root is the word education again. It means to lead, to develop, and to awaken. The important one, to awaken. Now, we're steadfast in our belief that molding, training, leading, developing, and awakening men to the power of the idea of Masonry is our primary business, and it's best achieved by instructing and educating them as they advance through their degrees, not waiting until later. We take that very seriously. It's a serious responsibility. And to accomplish that task, we've supplemented it with presenting Masonic educations at every stated meeting we've had since 2014, when we don't have degree work or floor work scheduled. There's little to nothing, brothers, that any of us can do about what has occurred in American Freemasonry in past centuries that led to the drift from its historical intent and its purpose. But what we can do is we can wisely improve the present. And we can do that by learning from the past. Now, for multiple generations, we've been shown a way to improve the present. Well, we're going backwards here. Go backwards one more. We've been shown a way to improve the present, brothers, if that is, we really mean business about Masonic education. And whether we mean it in the future as in the past, Masons and their lodges, there's been many Sentinels and Sustainers of the craft who do mean business beyond ritual. And they do that by the two things we've mentioned tonight. And that's educating their members as they pass through the degrees, and they guard their west gate to make sure the men they let in are the men who fit their lodge. Nobody keeps anybody from being a Mason at another lodge, especially in towns as large as Lexington and Nashville. You can go to any lodge you want, but does he fit your culture in your lodge? And do you really mean business about Freemasonry? As Newton and others before him and since have pointed out, the true strength and power of the idea of Masonry isn't found in quantity with a number of names on a membership roster. The strength of Masonry and the power of the idea can be found in fewness if we consistently provide enriching Masonic education as men advance through the degrees, as well as afterwards. Now, West Nashville Lodge, Phoenix Lodge, is clearly one of the bastions of American Freemasonry today, and it really does mean business about Masonic education. You just have to know what's going on here at Phoenix to see that that is the path it's on and the culture to which it's devoted. I applaud all of the active and involved members in this lodge, its supporters, and the officers for the laudable and the worthy labors that clearly illustrate that you and your lodge are sentinels and sustainers of the historical design, intent, aim, and purpose of organized Freemasonry. So I thank you, brothers, for your opportunity to speak this evening in this impressive facility, very impressive facility, and for your attention and for your warm hospitality. Thank you very much.
questions.
Sure.
If anybody would like to ask any questions?
Yes, sir.
Could you speak a little bit about your screening process for your potential candidates?
Sure. We have a website, of course, and that's where 96% of our candidates come from. They have a place on our website. They can tell us if they're interested in learning more about Masonry. We give them a form back, and we tell them, we'd like to have this basic information about you. Your name. Are you a man? Do you live in our jurisdiction? How old are you? Have you ever been arrested? Have you been convicted of a felony? That much will get you another correspondence. And we just don't cut them off. We always respond. And we tell them, well, you're not qualified, and we explain why. When we respond the next time, we ask them to come to a dinner. We give them all the dates that we meet, time. We tell them dinner's on us when you come. Preferred dress is coat and tie. Now, if we have a guy show up in a ghillie suit, then we probably are not going to be as impressed with him because he hasn't listened or read the email. But most guys come, they're dressed not always in a coat and tie, but they're respectable, and that's what we want. When they show up, we have the one point of contact who meets them. We know they're coming because we ask them to call us, text us, give us an RSVP so we can accommodate you. 99% do. Sometimes it'll just show up out of nowhere. That person takes that person around the lodge, introduces them to men as they come in. We find a table, not with our regular guys, but a table of men that we know will welcome this young man or man. And by the end of the evening, we introduce him to everybody at that table and ask if he can join them. And they welcome him because he is a prospect. And they talk to him. They talk to him about what he does in life. Where does he live? Where's he from? What's his interest? We keep him completely engaged. Now, he knows he can't come into the lodge. We have to go in to start our meeting. We tell him we have to excuse ourselves. We'd like for him to come back if he's interested. If he can't come back and visit again, at least come and consider that to get into our lodge, you need to come to the orientation meeting. Now, we usually have 4, maybe 6 prospective petitioners show up at our orientation meeting. I'm there and 2 other instructors are there and probably the master, depending on the day that we hold it. And we go to our library and we have an hour to get to know each other a little bit. And these candidates to get to know each other, because if they all get accepted at once, they'll all be in a class, only 4 at a time though. We'll start 2 classes, but no more than 4. If they decide to submit a petition, then they have to find the 2 people who will sign it for them. We don't run and say, well, I'll sign it. Why don't you get that guy over there to sign it? The guy who signs it, he has to be held responsible. And we do hold them responsible. So if they get in, we go through the petition process and we vote to give them the 3 degrees of Masonry. Then the investigation committee starts.
Just a little follow-up. As that process goes forward, is there a time where you would visit this prospect at his own home?
Yeah, that happens if they submit a petition and if it is voted that we assign an investigation team to determine if we wish to award them the 3 degrees. Then the investigation team meets them 3 times, once at their home, or if they don't want us to come to their home, we have to find out what's going on there. But we invite their wife to come to lodge and meet with us too, whoever they want to bring. But yes, that's an absolute, that's a necessity. Yes, sir. And we do a criminal investigation background and many other things.
I found that over the years, you'll find out a lot about your
Oh, yeah.
prospective member by going and seeing him on his own turf. And most of the Tennessee lodges that I'm aware of don't do that. I don't understand why. My home lodge always did that.
Yeah.
And you learn a lot about a man when you
Exactly.
pull up in his driveway, actually.
Now, as I said during the presentation, if we've had a man who says, I'm just too busy, I can't do these 6 months for every degree, I can't do this. Well, we said, well, we're not going to keep you from becoming a Mason someplace. Let me rephrase that. We don't think you're going to become a Mason just because you're passed through ritual. You're made a Mason. You become a Mason, just like I think everybody in this room is doing, through your lifetime. We tell them, we can't stop you, and we're not going to stand in your way. There's 2 other lodges in Lexington, and if you want to go through their lodges, go to them, talk to them. We encourage you to do that, if they're in Lexington to start with, of course. Most of them don't. Few of them do. But we know they're not going to be passed by the investigation committee unless we can confirm that they have time for not just taking the classes, but some promise that afterwards they'll devote some time to masonry. Now, we have taken guys who are in the military, and we know they're going to be gone. We've taken guys who we know have careers that they don't have total control over. And in the middle of the class, it's possible that they'll get shipped to Canada or to the Philippines. That's not going to keep them from going through number 1 if they want, then picking it up wherever they go. We want them involved. We want to help men who are good men to advance their Masonic interest. So we don't reject anybody except those who say, I don't have time for this. If they don't have time for the classes, our experience has been they don't have time for masonry afterwards either. Hope that answers your question. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
How often are the classes?
We hold anywhere between 3 and 4 classes a year. Now, there may be different classes going on. We may have 2 EA classes, 1 master class, or 3 fellowcraft classes, and no EA classes.
Well, how often do they meet during that 24 weeks?
Twice a week. Twice a week for usually 2 hours in our library. We do have Zoom meetings occasionally, but not to discuss ritual work or memory work. We do special presentations by Zoom. The pandemic, like it did everybody, it threw us way off, and we had to start using Zoom, but we didn't do it for the memorization work or by conference call. We needed to be in person. So like most lodges, we used our huge dining room, and we spread out all over the place and continued to teach masonry. Since 2011, we haven't had one person say it wasn't worth it to spend that much time. Not one candidate, which means we now have a cycle of, I think it's 8 cycles of masters and wardens who all went through this class, staunch supporters of everybody else doing this too. It's paid us dividends. Yes, sir.
Looking forward to a trip to Lexington, #1.
Please come.
I'm curious, when you mentioned the investigation team, does the team coordinate and show up together? Is that an individual? How does that team work?
We have 3 men on the investigation committee. Often they're appointed, 2 of them are appointed by the master, but there's a chair. Sometimes the chair rotates after about 8 or 9 months. Depends on how many candidates and how busy they are. All 3 meet at the same time. No less than 2 go on a home visit. The first officer, who is our point of contact, he's considered part of the investigation committee, but he doesn't have a vote in there. He's just the first contact to give first impressions. And any member of our lodge or any man who's a Mason can come to any of our investigation committees in private and say, I know something about this guy you need to know, whether it's bad or good. If a guy wants to come and vouch for somebody, we want that too. But if somebody knows something that we haven't found out, knows that he's trying to get into our lodge, we have had that happen. Or we receive a phone call, or we have somebody come to us and say, we probably should talk in confidence. And as a Mason, we respect that for them. But we do double check to make sure there's no hidden agenda there. Yes, sir.
The man who broke the builder, did he have any ideas about had already been through the degrees, but they had received education?
Yeah, the joke in that era for that group was keep your fingers crossed. Yeah, he was proposing. Newton proposed, wipe the slate clean, brothers. Keep producing education in your lodges for the men who didn't get this, but wipe the slate clean and realize it's going to take a generation to make it the smallest dent. Our lodge, it took 12 years. And if we hadn't had the commitment and the will of the men we circled together to say, this is what we want our Masonic Lodge to be, if we hadn't had that, the older members would have quashed it. And they tried for about 4 years to quash it. But eventually, they quit coming to Lodge. They're still members. We still welcome them when they come, but they're no longer the majority. And they can't change back unless somebody in this culture today says, well, it's good enough. We don't really need to do this investigation committee quite so strictly. Or it's good enough if we take the classes back to 4 weeks. As soon as that happens, the culture we built with strength starts weakening just like Masonry did in the early 1800s. And that's what we guard against.
So how did you build the organizational discipline, have the commitment to start that journey and stick with it? Right? We've got a lodge that's over 200 years old. We're lucky if we raise 2 masters a year. We've got a young man right now who we're going to raise Thursday night. Incredibly bright Mason, right? He's going to be something huge for that fraternity. But if we told, and we're raising him through those degrees just as fast as he can learn his lecture.
Yeah.
And if we told our members the way to treat this young man and make sure that he makes it is to slow him down, we would have open revolt. So how did you kind of get that commitment? I'm sure you lost candidates through this process who didn't.
Not because of the process. We lost them because of career changes, the military, a wife one time, but not because of the process itself. No, not at all. And that's more so because we don't admit those who we don't think can do it. To answer your question now, and you said, you're sure we had problems? Well, yeah, we had a revolt. And we sold it on this premise. Keep your shirt on. Let's try 6 months of a pilot program. Because unlike maybe your lodge at this point, we raised like 40 men in 4 years before we did this. And you can imagine the quality of that. Now, we were getting candidates right and left. We just weren't weeding through them very well. So we said, 6 months, let us weed through a little differently, and let's try this program. If it isn't working by the end of 2011, we've given it a shot. It worked. And the very next year, we happened to have a master to say, this worked, and we're doing it. And his warden supported him, and we haven't stopped. That's unique, I know. And I wish there was a good answer for you on how to handle all that. But I think most of the men in this room have experienced something like that. And that's the condition we're in, brothers. You know, we have to maybe just pilot it, prove it, and let the results speak for themselves. But we know we can't do it just overnight. Yes, sir.
So if anybody wanted to implement the same curricula in their lodge, would you guys be willing to share your materials, teach us how to teach?
Sure. We do that a lot. And because we do it a lot, we had to set up a process. And here's the reason. Are you all familiar with Robert G. Davis, past Grand Master of Oklahoma? We use Bob's book, Seeking Light in Freemasonry. It's an excellent book. If you don't have it, I suggest you get it. It covers all 3 degrees. Now, we think Bob's writing and his lessons on each of the 3 degrees was much better than any of us could come up with. So we got with Bob and said, we'd like to adopt a chapter on each 3 of the degrees out of your book. And we don't want to rewrite them. We want to just take your book and blend it in with our guidebook on what we need to teach about our lodge in Kentucky Masonry. He said, yeah, do it. He said, but it's copyrighted. So we have to respect that. He's given us permission, and we can distribute it throughout our lodge for the purpose of education. What we can't do is give the guidebook to another lodge who doesn't have copyright authority to have that without buying it. Now, we try to work around that in that you can go buy the book right now. So you already have it for your lodge. If you want our guidebook, we can send you everything but that. Does that make sense? Now, but keep in mind the guidebook's written for Lexington Lodge #1. It's not meant to be just a template to lay over every lodge, but it does have features that are template features. We'll send you all the handouts, the papers we use. You can use those freely. Most of them are on our websites anyway. As far as helping men to instruct, we can do that, but of course we can't send our guys out to the journey across the world to do that because they've got their lives. We haven't found a way to do it in Kentucky. We've done it. We've invited Masons from other lodges come and sit through an entire class, be a third chair, and come and learn how we do it. We don't often get too many people to do that because that's, again, a time commitment. But our process is, if your lodge was interested, are you a member of this lodge? If Phoenix is interested, write a letter to me. I will share that letter with the master. The process is, we need you to answer some questions on paper to assure that you won't violate our agreement with Bob and not sell it, not put it on the internet or anything else. Once we do that, we'll send you PDFs of what we have. And we'll help you by phone as much as possible, or Zoom, on how we facilitate discussions and at what part of the curriculum we do that, so that we don't get too far ahead of the candidates before they learn something they didn't know was a fundamental. Yes, sir.
If you would give us a benchmark reference, what is your degree fee, approach to degree fees and your annual dues?
Annual dues are $240. Our fees are between $50 and $100 in advance. Yes, sir. And we do have a lot of members, older members, who don't pay dues. We abolished the 50-year membership. You paid nothing, which was very popular in Kentucky from the 1940s on. Our lodge did it. There were over 800 members who paid no dues for years, back when the lodge was huge. We're only 130 members today, down from 1,600 in the 60s and 70s. A lot of men can't afford any dues. And we have a relief committee, and if we sustain the fact that they're concerned that they can't pay any dues, we grant them annually permission not to pay dues. Yes, sir.
An active Scottish Rite Mason, thankful for everything I've learned in that process. There's a culture I'm observing as a relatively new Mason. There's a culture where as soon as you become a master Mason, these appendant bodies will reach into that body and recruit. I'm thankful again for having that experience. It feels like what you're putting this process through is a extended education in the Blue Lodge before they are eligible for these other appendant bodies. A little bit and help us understand.
Well, as in most jurisdictions, as soon as a man's made a master mason, he's eligible. He doesn't have to do anything else. He's just eligible for every appendant body. We don't discourage any man from going on to an appendant body. We've learned over the last 8 years of doing this that men are slower to go to an appendant body, and they're more actively involved in our lodge. It's not that they won't do it, and it's not that they're discouraged to do it. It's just there's still a lot left to explore in Blue Lodge Masonry, and we attribute it to that. The men, we have a valley in Lexington and Louisville, have a Scottish or a York Rite in both places. They can join any place they want. And in the past, we did have members that did come, or petitioners who came to us and said, well, I don't have time for all this stuff. I'm just going to go straight to the Scottish Rite anyway, or become a Shrider. I'll say, well, great, do that at one of the other lodges, but you can't do it here. We're not set up to be the mill for others. We want you to understand Masonry first, and that's your choice. But learn Masonry. Yes, sir.
When you launched your instructor degree pilot program, did you start with a 24-week program, or did you
No,
lead it up to that? What did you start with?
we had to be, we had to acquiesce to the issue. You know, it was our lodge since 1788 had been doing it every 28 days, the sooner the better. I think the longest we had in our minutes that we can find is a guy who had to spend 46 days in 1 degree. So we were rushed constantly. We said 6 weeks, which led to that revolt thing I'm talking to you about a minute ago. We took it back down to add 2 more weeks to 4. They did that, not by vote in lodge, just by the officers. And then we took it 10 weeks. And then we went 12 weeks. Then we took it 14 weeks. And we just incrementally changed it because by the time we got to the 12th week, everybody kind of forgotten about, well, what happened? Every 30 days we had a degree class. It kind of fell by the wayside. And our proficiencies, we return a professional style proficiency. They don't come into a committee. They come in this open lodge. And they stand before the entire body of the lodge, and an instructor asks the questions. After the questions are answered, all 4 of them, it's a round robin except for the obligation. And every Mason has to repeat all obligations of his degree during his return. When you have 4 guys in class, it takes a while, of course, on the master's degree. That's why we don't have more than 4. When they're through, just to make sure they know what they're talking about, our master, before he calls for a vote, asks the warden, do you have any further questions of the candidates? He can ask him any question he wants about any topic of the 3 degrees. If there's a Master Mason as an EA, any question about the EA degrees, anything that has been taught out of that guidebook. And these men have to answer it. Same for the fellowcraft degree, same for the master's degree. Then he asks the junior warden if he has any questions. He can do the same thing. And then finally, the master. If he asks questions, he can keep them there for another hour. And they've got to answer those questions in front of the body of the lodge to demonstrate that they know what they're talking about. Then he calls for a vote. Yes, sir.
Obviously received the degree before you have the class, so how does that work with your masters?
They receive, in Kentucky, you're not required to return a proficiency as a Master Mason. So it's whatever you were heard in the degree, you're forever a Master Mason to find it yourself after that. What we do is if you, in Kentucky, under the jurisdiction, if you want to be an officer, you have to return a proficiency. Now we build on that. If you want to be an officer, of course, if you want to be a part of anything in this lodge, you need to return your proficiency, guys, because there hasn't been anyone who hasn't since 2011. Do you want to be the one guy? So we shame them into it.
Just another commitment requirement.
It is a commitment. And we haven't found one guy that says, well, I don't think I want to, because he's got 3 other guys or 2 other guys in his class saying, yes, you are too. So that peer pressure works as a pretty good process. And they all return their proficiencies. And I think that's a great approach to it, proving itself out for us. Brothers, I'll be glad to talk to you anytime by phone. Ryan has my email. You're welcome to come to Lexington first and third Mondays of every month. Rubicon Masonic Society does, we're in our 56th, I believe, episode of monthly Zoom meetings on education on our Rubicon channel. It is edited, the live meetings, which is taking place right now, as a matter of fact. And they're posted on our YouTube channels. They have over 130,000 views since May of 2020 around the world. Some more interesting than others, depending on what your taste is. Brother Joe, I know that your taste may not be the same as everybody else's in respect of what you said in your introduction, but there's something in the way of education, no matter what your interest is in Masonry. I would encourage you to watch those. And if you're not on our announcement list, again, give your email to Ryan. I'm giving you all this work tonight, Ryan. Give your email to him. We'll put you on our announcement list so that you're aware every month of who's speaking, what the topic is, and get the Zoom link. So you can join us if you want to. We hold these if you haven't seen one. How many have been on one? Anybody? We require coat and tie because we think that's the decorum for a Masonic discussion. We don't want, smoking, cheering drinks or having toast. We don't do that. This is a Masonic discussion, gentlemanly, and we ask everybody to do that. It works perfect in the live sessions. And when they're posted on YouTube, the world will see how you behaved as a Mason. And that's a good thing, brothers. Thank you very much for your hospitality tonight. And please come to Lexington if you ever get an opportunity to do it. We'd welcome to have you. Thank you, brothers.